We will go ahead and get started with the presentation today on Mitsubishi's FR-E800 drive. I guess first off, can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, Eric. This is Brian.
Okay. So my name is Eric McKibben. I'm with Tri-Phase Automation, in charge of our services group engineers and product managers. On the phone today or online with us, we also have Steve Taugis with Tri-Phase, who is our product manager for Mitsubishi. So if there are any questions, Steve or Chris Kusik from Mitsubishi, who will be doing the presentation, should be able to answer those. But we're going to go ahead and kind of get things started. The first thing I will ask is we will mute everybody. If you have any questions, please chat them in. I will be monitoring the chat and break into Chris's presentation when the opportunity arises to ask those questions or answer anything that you may have. We'll also have some time at the end to answer any additional questions. So first off, Chris, are you on the line? Chris, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Super.
Right.
Okay, so I'm ready to go.
All right, so I stopped sharing my presentation, Chris, so you should be able to go ahead and share yours.
All right. Can you see the presentation now?
Not yet.
Oh. No luck?
No, no presentation yet.
Hold on. How about now? Can you see me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. I'm not 100% familiar with Zoom, so it took me a minute there to figure it out. I think we got it now. Okay, so shall I just make a start?
Yeah, please go ahead and start, Chris.
All right. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for attending today. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and that feels a little bit strange doing everything virtually. For those of you who may not have met me before, I'm Chris Kusik. I'm Senior Project Specialist for VFD for the Midwest region. So one of my main roles is distributor support for Tri-Phase. And I'm here today to talk about the new E800 VFD. I've been with Mitsubishi for 28 years now altogether. So this is something like a 5th iteration of Mitsubishi's micro compact drives that I've been through. So I've seen a lot of water going under the bridge. Today I'm going to be talking, as I said, about the new E800 drive. I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet. If I get it right, then this presentation shouldn't take more than half an hour to go through, at the end of which I'll be very happy to try and address any questions you may have. As you can imagine, there's a lot we could talk about, so I'm going to have to kind of cut to the chase during the presentation. Okay, so moving swiftly on, what are we trying to do? What's Mitsubishi's intention with the E800 drive? The first thing to really the value proposition, if I can use that buzzword, is we want to take the frame sizes and obviously the price structure of a micro drive and a compact drive and give that the same performance that typically you've only ever been able to do with a high performance drive, vector control drives, in other words. So a lot of the features that have been incorporated into the E800 drive, it's very unusual to find those in such a small package, in the case of the E800 drive. So that's really what we're trying to do. We're taking advanced AC drive features and trying to integrate that into our traditional micro drive, compact drive format. Just looking quickly at what we are going to be doing, what's going to be available with the E800 drives, the first thing I would like to say is that as of this date, there is no plan to discontinue the existing E700 range of compact drives. So if you're already using E700 drives, if you're happy with them and the options and accessories that go with the E700s, you are not going to have to change until you are ready to change or until you want to change. You know, we will continue to support E700 and we're going to be bringing in E800 alongside it. Our plan, of course, is to try and generate new business and not simply migrate our existing business over to the new platform. So if you look at the chart here, you can see the sizes and variations that are available in the black dots are already available. The red dots will be coming, so we're looking at the end of this calendar year, they say winter 2020 to finish this range. When it says three-phase 200 volts, of course, it means 230 volts. Three-phase 400 volts means 480 volts. In fact, anywhere between 380 and 480 volts is fine. You will also note that there is something you don't have with E700. You know, there is also going to be a three-phase 575 or 600 volt range of E800s. This is particularly important for customers in Canada, and a lot of our customers here in the USA like to have an option which is available so that if they get a customer in Canada, they can make a machine that runs on Canadian voltages. Up to 2.2 kilowatts, which is 3 horsepower, there is a single phase 230 volt version drive also, which of course is single phase in but 3 phases out. And in the same way that we have with the E700 drives, we do plan to make a 100 volt in, 200 volt out drive, which would be the E810 drive. At the top end, you can see that we are planning to extend this out. So with the E700 drives, for example, 7.5 kilowatts or 10 horsepower is the biggest drive we currently make. You can see we're going to take this right the way out. At the end of this year, we're going to go out to 22 kilowatts, which will be a 30 horsepower drive. And the same thing will happen with the 480 volt drives. Currently, E700 is available up to 20 horsepower. So we already got to 15 kilowatts with it. But we are going to take that out to 30 horsepower as well. So that will extend quite a lot of different applications that currently we have to use an F800 drive or an E800 drive to fill. There will also be 2 different distinct versions of E800. There will be a version which has an embedded Ethernet capability, and there will be a version of the drive which is, I'm going to call the conventional drive, which has conventional controls. It has serial communications, and it also has, you know, option card capability, but really it's very similar in concept to how the E700 drive works today. So here you see pictures of the 2 different drives. The one on the left is the version which is closest to the E700 drive in concept. And you can see in the same way it has a built-in keypad. It also has the M dial, which is something that all 800 series drives have had up to now, which you can use not only for speed control, but also for parameter setting, diagnostics, and indeed anything else you might want to do with the drive. In the same way as with the 700 series drive, you can also connect regular keypads to it and use it with, for example, the PU07 keypad. It will work just fine. There is a version of the E800 now, which is going to be called the E800E, which has built-in Ethernet communications. I'm going to come to that in the second slide. But in the same way as an A800E drive has Ethernet communications, we have now built that in to the E800 and made that into a separate drive, which is going to be the E800E. When we do that, as you can see, because you have extra lights for the communications, there's no room for the dial. So Japan have reverted to using an up and down type parameter selection tool for changing parameters. And also the I/O on the E800E is more limited. So whereas the E700 has exactly the same functionality as the E700, the E800E, we're assuming that most control is going to be done over the Ethernet, so the amount of I/O is quite limited. You know, you have 5 points of I/O, I think, altogether for that drive. So what kind of applications do we expect it to have for the E800 drive? You know, where do we look to expand our activities? Well, it's going to have outstanding dynamic performance. So essentially, its performance will be the same as the A800 drive. So, you know, that opens up things like hoisting applications for us. Anything with a production line and automation, any kind of conveyor control, particularly where you might want networking control, the E800 drive will be a great choice for that. Car washes, you know, that's another one where you often have multiple small motors and you want to coordinate them together. It's going to have some distinct advantages if we are talking about pumps of different kinds. So that could be in some sort of water treatment plant. It could be booster pumps in the HVAC environment, or things like dosing pumps in a water treatment plant. You know, the E800 drive would be ideally suited for those types of applications too. Any kind of material handling, you know, big warehouses, the Amazons of this world, UPS, anybody with multiple conveyors, this would be a great drive. You know, its networking capabilities recommend it certainly for that. Any kind of fans, paint lines, you know, beyond that whole myriad of different both OEM and end user type applications kind of recommend themselves to it. Okay, so having talked about that in outline, I'll go through a few of the important details of the E800, how it has been changed, and what it might mean to you, you know, how you might be able to take advantage of the new features. So the first thing I should say about E800 probably is that unlike the E700 drives, it has a dual overload rating. What does that actually mean? Well, rather than just having 150% overload for 60 seconds with one fixed rated current for that drive, which it cannot exceed, you can now select a lighter duty, the so-called LD rating, and with an overload of 120% for 60 seconds, which, by the way, is what most of our competitors use anyway, then you can have a higher continuous current. So, for example, if you have a pump, if you have a fan, which is a lighter load, what that means is you can take a smaller drive. So let's say, for example, we have a 10 horsepower pump and we want to use a drive on it. Essentially, I can take what would nominally be a 7.5 horsepower E800 drive, and by selecting light duty, it will output enough continuous current to drive that pump. So obviously, with that higher output current, I can use a smaller drive, and I can be more competitive with the price that I offer for that product. So that's an important feature. That is also true of the F and A800 drives, but we have never done that before with our micro drives and our compact drives. So that's a definite step in the right direction, I think. Also new for the E700 drives, the E800 drive will be able to work with IPM motors. These are permanent magnet motors, which are becoming increasingly popular in certain industries. One of the things that recommends Mitsubishi, I think, above some of our competitors here is that Mitsubishi motors have a very simple auto-tune feature, which allows us to use our drives with virtually anybody's IPM motors. So, you know, if it's a Baldor motor, if it's a Nova Torque motor, you know, whoever else makes the IPM motors, the drive can tune itself. You know, you as the operator or setting this thing up can take that motor and you can tune it yourself. You don't need support from the factory, for example. That gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of fast setup. And again, of course, it opens up markets that we could never approach with the E700 and the D700 drives. You know, anytime it was an IPM motor, even if it was only a small one, we would have had to use like the A or the FR-E800 platform for that. And obviously, in many cases, that would be quite a high cost way of doing things. It's already opened up quite a few interesting applications. people are looking at it already for small DC motor replacements where that's never been cost effective before. And also powered rollers are increasingly being offered with IPM motors built into them. So that gives us a lot of new applications within material handling. Let's look a little bit more closely at the Ethernet version of the drive. As you remember, this is the E800E. This is built in. Obviously, Ethernet communications has a whole range of different advantages compared to just using conventional connections or even RS-485 communications with the drive. Of course, you're using less hardware, right? You've simply got patch cables connecting everything together. Your network setup is easier. You have remote access to the drive, and you have simple network architecture. One of the things I'd like to point out here is that this drive has dual port, so you can configure drives as a daisy chain. You don't have to use a star configuration. So in this respect, at least, it is actually superior to the A800 drive, which has only got a single port RJ45 jack. So that recommends itself. And I think that's probably pretty unusual to find a compact drive on Ethernet that can actually do that. The most prominent competitor for this drive would be the Rockwell 535 drive. And that particular drive only has a single port as standard. You have to buy an option if you want to use dual port on their drive with built-in Ethernet communications. So, we actually have a competitive advantage there versus our biggest competitor. You can see again the up-down arrows there are pointed out. Okay, so digging into that in a little bit more detail, what protocols can the E800 drive actually operate on? So the factory have set up 3 different protocol groups, A, B, and C. In North America, the version that we are going to focus in on is protocol group A. Every one of those networks are networks that we are often asked for. So I think that's a really positive move from the factory. It is really designed with North American market in mind. First and foremost, it has Ethernet IP communications built in as standard. So this is something that isn't even available with the A and the F800 drives. If I want to use Ethernet IP with an A800, for example, I have to buy an option card for that. Even the Ethernet version of the drive does not actually do Ethernet IP. Beyond that, the standard drive can also accept Modbus TCP or BACnet IP, which is very popular in the HVAC world, or indeed CC-Link IE Field Basic, which is another very important network. All of these networks are important to us. If you have customers who want to use Modbus, for example, Profinet, sorry, I'm looking to see what's special. If you have Profinet, you can order the drive with protocol B, but that is not actually what is standard in North America. So we'd have to order that and get it for you. There will also be a dedicated version, which is Group C, which only supports EtherCAT. So I don't have an ETA for that yet. I don't actually know when that's actually going to be available. So that gives you a whole range of tremendous amount of flexibility there. But really, the standard protocol Group A, I think, covers the great majority of, the different protocols that we want to use right there. And of course, at no extra cost. Also available are things like the add-on instruction sets that you might need for Ethernet IP, for example, drivers, of course, and everything else that you might want to actually set that up. So that's a really important step forward. Ethernet communications is one of the biggest areas where, we felt that the E700 needed an update to actually make it a competitive product. So that's a very important step forward for us. In the same way that we can already do with the F and the A800 drives, the GOT drive package is also available now. So you can actually use the GOT 2000, which can virtually connect directly to an E800 drive. And using sample screens which are pre-written for you, you have everything you might need for parameter settings, batch monitoring, load measurement, anything like that, faults and errors, diagnostics and so forth can all be done that way. A very, very simple process is like 3 parameters I think you need to change on the drive, and essentially then it will start communicating directly with the screen. So, you know, we have certainly with the AN F800s now, we have customers who are just using a screen rather than a keypad. And of course, you can have multiple drives on one screen as well, which also makes it an attractive proposition sometimes. Reliability in the field, hopefully that's a given with any Mitsubishi drive. I'm sure that will be true of the E800 drive too. While I remember to mention it, it's of course covered by the same 5-year warranty that we have always offered. So, you know, if you buy a drive, it's guaranteed by MEAU for 5 years. Other features that make it particularly easy to use in the field. Number one feature is that using the setup port, the USB port, you can actually program the drive without even powering it up. So for example, I could use my setup software, FR Configurator 2. I can plug that straight into a drive. It doesn't need to be connected to power at all, and literally it will wake up. I can then upload and download parameters, do diagnostics on it to a certain extent, and check error messages and all that kind of thing. The drive has a range of parameters. So for example, it has an operating hours parameter, which can schedule. You can use that. So for example, it sends you a signal after it's been driving for 5,000 hours if you want to check it. And it also has a life diagnosis function. So if we're talking about predictive maintenance rather than preventive maintenance, obviously a scheduled maintenance is something you check after time to see if it needs replacing or not. But the actual diagnosis function will tell you what's really going on. You know, what are the state of the capacitors, what is the state of the cooling fans, the pre-charge circuit, and everything within the drive. So that will actually give you real life information that you can use as part of predictive maintenance. So, you know, we can do internal monitoring and diagnostics, and you can keep a running check on the state of your drives here. So that has some advantages compared to preventive maintenance, right? I mean, after 5,000 hours, are you just going to replace the drive? You know, that may not well be necessary. You know, this feature will tell you, you know, in many cases, your capacitors might be totally fine, and you don't need to do that replacement. So it has advantages compared to doing preventive maintenance. I can make a distinction between those two things. So it looks at the state of the power module, the fault relays, cooling fans, and also the in-rush circuit of the drive. Those are the things which wear out the fastest on a VFD. So that's all good news. You can obviously network that, connect it to virtually any network. You can then store that data, analyze it, and come up with a whole plant predictive maintenance system if you want to go that far. So for example, big automotive companies will typically do that. They want to schedule maintenance when they actually need to do it. You don't want to be replacing things that probably don't need replacing. FR Configurator 2 has been updated. So now if you have a FR Configurator, it essentially works with all of the drives, every single drive, right from, you know, we currently sell from D700 right up to E800. You can do a diagnosis check straight from the drive if you want to. There's one button that you click, and it will immediately fire back and say, here is the state of the capacitors, here's how many hours it's run, how many power-ups it's done, you know, and what's its general state of health, which is something we could never do before. It also has some advanced features. So for example, it uses, if the drive trips for whatever reason, it uses an advanced feature that gives you much more detailed information about what the likely cause of the problem is. You know, in the past, that's really not been a very helpful feature. You know, it doesn't really give you real information, you know, or real suggestions of parameters and things that you could check. So that's all being improved. We can also do waveform graphing now with the drive. So you can obviously look at the waveform and store that if necessary. One of the other most useful things that you can do with the setup software in the same way as with the A and the F800 drives, it will automatically set up Ethernet communications for you. So essentially, it finds the subnet mask addresses and everything and writes the parameters into the drive to get you started. So it greatly simplifies setting up an Ethernet network, particularly if you've got multiple drives to work with. A very helpful feature. Again, new for the E800 drive, it has a built-in PLC within it. The E800 PLC function is very similar to the A800, but with some limitations. So as you can see on the slide here, you have the 2,000 steps instead of 6,000 steps, and the scan time is slightly longer. With that said, it works a very, very similar way. You program it exactly the same way as you would with an A800 drive or an F800 drive. So in reality, it's very, very easy to change, take a program that you've written with an A800, you can pretty simply write it into the E800 drive. Some of the register addresses may change and things like that, but really not big problem areas. You can set up control loops here. You can use the PLC in all kinds of functions. We have used it in a whole range of different ways. In many cases, we are trying to do something relatively simple. We're trying to count the number of rotations of a spindle, for example, or we are trying to use multiple thermal overloads with one drive and do diagnostics like that. So, 2,000 steps is plenty for nearly everything that we've actually done. Another feature which before you had to use the A and the F800 drive for, the Ethernet version of the drive can communicate drive to drive, so without a PLC there at all. So essentially you can take a string of E800 drives and use one of them as the master. So this one is obviously the master PLC. It's essentially sending instructions to all of these slave drives down the line. And they can either be E800 drives or, for example, in this case here, this could be an F800 drive or an A800 drive. So, you can have a 1 horsepower drive here telling a 500 horsepower drive here what to do in the string. Lots of different applications where this would be handy. A couple of the more popular ones that we've done up to now have been load sharing applications, or for example, you want to change speed or torque amongst multiple drives which are actually mechanically linked together, for example, on a chain conveyor or a long conveyor belt in an aggregate, like a quarry or something like that. So you could use the drive that way. You can also use it for multiple pump control where you want a complicated duty standby system. Very, very simple to operate it that way as well. So you can do that communication methodology at the same time as you are linking to another network. So for example, the master drive might actually be linked via Ethernet communications and then communicating drive to drive on a separate language there. So that gives you a lot of extra functionality within this simple drive. We are going to bring out an improved safety version of this drive. If you have the standard version drive, so the one I've just been talking about up to now, it is already a safety drive. So it already supports what we call STO, which is safe torque off, or just coasting to a stop when the emergency stop button is hit. It still does that. We are introducing another version of this drive, which is going to be the SC, and also there will be a version called SCE, which will be, as you imagine, the Ethernet version of the safety drive, which will allow us to do enhanced safety. So in other words, it will do STO, SS1, SLS, SBC, and SSM, which will be supported by this new drive. The SCE version of this drive will also be able to do safety over a network. So it'll be able to do support a Profi-safe network, for example, or i.e. TSN safety as well. So obviously the advantages are clear there. There's less complexity, less wiring, and simplicity and greater dependability as a result of all of that. I don't have a final date on that. Obviously, we're already after May 2020. I'm thinking probably the 3rd quarter of this year before that's actually available there. So I'm getting close to the end here. Just some things I'd like to remember before I sign off and answer any questions. Just to remind you, this is now going to go up to 30 horsepower. So we're greatly expanding the range of this drive beyond, traditional sort of market. Goes up to about 10 or 20 horsepower. We're going right up to 30 horsepower. That could, of course, be a 40 horsepower pump or fan because of the light duty rating, right? And the same with these other drives. You essentially go up a horsepower rating for all of these. There is going to be a new three-phase, already is a new three-phase 600-volt drive, which is something that we really need to supplement the rest of the range. And obviously, single-phase 230 volts is already available, I think, up to 3 horsepower. Later in the year, there will be a single-phase 110-volt in, 230-volt, three-phase out version of that drive, but only up to 1 horsepower. You go to dual RJ45, you have built-in multiple Ethernet protocols, and, in the specific drive we're talking about, SIL3 functional safety network as well, for the SCE drives. Okay. Don't forget also IPM, permanent magnet auto tuning. That's becoming more and more of a thing, permanent magnet motors. Built-in PLC, it has PID control and also a dual PID control, because you can also do PID control within the PLC of the drive now. And as I mentioned, also you can do inverter to inverter synchronization as well. Some of the things that we plan for this drive to take it to the next level, just to give you a taster of what's coming. Right now, the E800 drive can be used either in speed control or torque control open loop. So I can do torque control with the E800 drive as well as just speed control. But we will be producing a vector control version of this drive with encoder. So Japanese say PLG, they mean encoder. So that gives you, true vector control. Essentially, potentially you could make a 4-quadrant controller using an E800 drive that way. As it says, PID control is for that too. Once we have the encoder feedback card, which will be just the same A8 AP card that we use with the regular drives, you'll also be able to do position control with this drive. So you'll be able to access a point table, for example, or a motion control module even, and use position control to change the position of the drive. High frequency superposition control, I'm not too clear on what they mean there. Senseless vector, there will also be a special range of small IPM motors which Mitsubishi makes called the EMA series, which we will offer alongside of those drives. Another feature that we will be introducing will be increased magnetic excitation deceleration, which is a real mouthful. What that basically means is that the drive has a feature which allows you to ramp down more quickly without using a brake resistor. So essentially, it changes the waveform of the drive to make the motor inefficient as a generator, and that way you can ramp down a motor much more quickly. That's also already available on the bigger drives. We're introducing that too. And then optimum excitation control is an energy-saving feature, essentially, which basically allows the drive to drive a lightly loaded motor using the minimum amount of energy. So those are all extra features which are coming probably by the end of this calendar year. So that's it. That's the end of the main presentation. So I hope you found that interesting, and hopefully that stimulated some ideas. If you've got any comments or questions, I'll be very happy to take them on board at this time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Chris, for your presentation. Didn't have a ton of questions come in.
Well, that's good. Hope it's good.
I guess the one did come in from Chris Rhodes, and I guess I'm not sure what that means. Find it again here.
It's probably a question he wants to answer for everybody's benefit.
Well, he just texted in PF525.
Oh, that's right. I was trying to remember the part number of the Rockwell drive. I may have given you the wrong part number. So the Ethernet version of the Rockwell drive is the PowerFlex 525. The non-Ethernet version is the 523. And then the 525 is the version which has Ethernet IP built in. But significantly, it's only a single port drive. and it only supports Ethernet IP. So, you know, if it's Ethernet IP we're talking about, which it often is, then fine. But of course, it can't do Modbus TCP, for example.
Okay.
So hopefully, we can give it our run for its money.
Sure. There was one other question, but I think it's already been answered. Can this drive be commanded to apply a torque versus a speed? And it looks like Chris Rhodes also chimed in already, saying yes.
Yes, it can. Yes, yeah. So as long as we are, obviously, the precision is more when the encoder feedback card is available, then it will be able to do it with more precision. But yes, you can use this drive just like an A800 drive. You can use it in either torque control or speed control modes. Obviously, you know, speed control with torque limit, or you can have a torque control with a speed limit.
Right. The other question came in just regarding a link to any documentation. Yes, we can provide links to any documentation on this drive. We can share a recording of this presentation if you wanted to share it, and provide any other.
There is also a lot of information on the Mitsubishi website. There's like a dedicated area, I think, which they have opened up, which, so for example, all of the manuals for the E800 drive, the factory have actually broken it up now, so there are multiple different manuals for the E800 depending on what you're interested in. You know, presentations, technical information, links to the driver files you might need for networking and things like that is all available via the network, via the Mitsubishi website as well.
Okay. Well, we will take care of sending a link to that place on the Mitsubishi website to Russ, who asked that question.
Okay.
If there are any other questions, please feel free to chat them in or unmute yourself and ask them in person. So if there's no further questions, I'm just sharing contact information for Steve at the Tri-Phase office. If you think of anything afterwards that you have questions on, would like further information, there is Steve's contact information. Feel free to reach out to him. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you very much, Chris, for your time and expertise.
But you're very welcome. And if anything else does come up, if there's anything else you'd like to know, I'll be very happy to work with you to answer any other questions that may crop up.
Okay. Other than that, I would like to again thank everybody for joining and wish everybody a happy day.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.